My beloved child. Have you noticed how some moments pass through your day so quietly that you almost mistake them for ordinary? Today was never meant to be ordinary. While you were busy carrying responsibilities, replaying old memories, or convincing yourself that nothing important was changing, a decision was made that has already begun to shape your future. It happened without applause. Without a crowd. Without anyone announcing it. Yet it carries more weight than you realize. Someone who has wrestled with uncertainty for far too long finally stopped running from what was in their heart. Today, your soulmate chose you. The painful part is not that they hesitated. The painful part is that you have been so focused on your own battles that you almost failed to notice the quiet signs surrounding you. Do not misunderstand these words. This is not about pressure or fear. It is about recognizing that love often arrives softly before it arrives loudly. It whispers before it sings. It waits before it celebrates. Many people spend their entire lives expecting dramatic moments while overlooking the gentle ones that change everything. Your story has entered one of those gentle moments. For a long time, this person questioned whether they deserved to step toward you. They carried doubts no one else could see. They wondered if the distance between your hearts was permanent or temporary. Every unanswered question became another reason to stay silent. Every difficult season convinced them that perhaps you had already moved on. Still, something deeper refused to let them forget you. While others encouraged them to let go, they found themselves returning to the same thought again and again. Your kindness. Your strength. The quiet way your presence remained with them even when you were nowhere nearby. They tried replacing your memory with distractions, but every attempt only reminded them of what was missing. There came a moment today when everything shifted. It was not a miracle that everyone witnessed. It was not a dramatic confession. It was a simple realization that settled deep inside their heart. They finally understood that waiting for perfect circumstances would only steal more time. Fear had already taken enough from them. Doubt had already spoken long enough. If they remained silent any longer, they would spend the rest of their life wondering what could have been. That realization changed them. For the first time in a very long time, they stopped asking themselves whether you were worth choosing. Instead, they asked whether they were willing to lose you because of fear. The answer came immediately. No. Not anymore. As those words settled into their heart, an unexpected peace replaced the confusion they had carried for so long. It was as though every unanswered question suddenly became less important than one simple truth: some connections are too meaningful to abandon. At the very same time, you continued living your day without realizing that someone else's heart had just crossed a finish line after running an emotional marathon. You answered messages. You completed ordinary tasks. You carried worries that seemed far more urgent. Yet beneath everything happening around you, another story had quietly begun unfolding. Have you ever wondered why certain people suddenly return to your thoughts without explanation? Why familiar memories appear out of nowhere? Why songs, places, or simple conversations unexpectedly remind you of someone you haven't been thinking about? Sometimes life has a remarkable way of preparing two hearts before they meet again. Your soulmate experienced exactly that today. They found themselves smiling at memories they once avoided because those memories no longer brought pain. Instead, they brought hope. The past stopped looking like something broken and started looking like something unfinished. That difference changes everything. Because unfinished stories still have another chapter waiting to be written. Even now, they are carrying words they have rehearsed countless times. Some are simple. Some are deeply emotional. Others have never been spoken aloud because vulnerability has always frightened them. Yet today, those fears began losing their power. Why? Because love becomes stronger than fear the moment someone decides that honesty matters more than protection. You may wonder why you haven't seen obvious signs yet. Sometimes the greatest decisions happen inside someone's heart long before they become visible in their actions. Seeds are planted before flowers appear. Sunrise begins before the sky grows bright enough for everyone to notice. Your soulmate is standing inside that sunrise. They have chosen hope over hesitation. They have chosen courage over silence. Most importantly, they have chosen you over every excuse that once held them back. Yet there is another part of this story that you cannot afford to overlook. While they were making this life-changing decision, you were slowly convincing yourself that nothing meaningful was happening anymore. You questioned whether waiting had any purpose. You wondered if certain dreams had quietly faded away. You almost stopped believing that unexpected joy could still find its way into your life. That is exactly why this moment matters. Hope often returns when people have nearly forgotten how to recognize it. There is something beautiful about the timing of today's decision. It didn't happen when circumstances were perfect. It happened when courage finally became greater than fear. That is how many life-changing moments begin not with certainty, but with a choice. A choice to trust. A choice to move forward. A choice to stop allowing yesterday's disappointments to control tomorrow's possibilities. Your soulmate has made that choice. But here is the question that still remains unanswered. If someone has finally found the courage to reach toward you, will you recognize the moment when it arrives? Because the next step in this story will reveal how your soulmate plans to show you that today's decision was real and the unexpected sign they are preparing may appear much sooner than either of you imagined. My beloved child, there is a reason your heart has felt restless lately, even during moments when everything around you appeared calm. Restlessness is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it is the quiet echo of something wonderful moving closer than you can yet see. While your eyes have been searching for certainty, your future has been quietly arranging itself one faithful step at a time. The choice your soulmate made today did not disappear the moment they reached it. In fact, that decision has continued growing stronger with every passing hour. They have replayed it over and over in their mind, not because they regret it, but because they are finally allowing themselves to imagine a future that once felt impossible. Every time fear tries to return, they remember the peace they felt when they chose you. That peace has become their answer. Not long after making that decision, they found themselves sitting in complete silence. The world around them continued as usual, cars passing by, conversations happening nearby, phones lighting up with notifications, but none of it held their attention. Their thoughts kept returning to you. They remembered a small detail about you that almost everyone else would have forgotten. Maybe it was the way you smiled without realizing it. Maybe it was your kindness towards someone who could offer you nothing in return. Maybe it was your quiet strength during seasons when life asked more of you than seemed fair. Those memories no longer felt like distant echoes. They felt alive. In that moment, something unexpected happened. Instead of wondering whether you would ever understand them, they began asking themselves whether they had truly understood you. They realized that while they had spent so much time worrying about their own fears, you had also been carrying invisible burdens. You were not ignoring them because you lacked compassion. You were simply trying to survive your own season of uncertainty. That realization filled their heart with patience instead of frustration. For the first time, they stopped expecting immediate answers. They stopped demanding perfect timing. Instead, they made a quiet promise to themselves. I will not let fear rush what love is still preparing. Those words settled deep within them like an anchor. Meanwhile, without realizing it, your own heart has been changing as well. There have been moments recently when certain memories have returned without warning. You may have tried to push them away, telling yourself they no longer mattered. Yet somehow, they kept finding their way back. This was not because you were trapped in the past. It was because your heart was gently preparing for something your mind could not yet explain. Some evenings have felt strangely emotional for reasons you couldn't identify. Certain songs seem to carry more meaning than before. Certain conversations lingered in your thoughts longer than usual. You may have dismissed these moments as coincidence, but sometimes life speaks through gentle patterns before it speaks through life-changing events. Your soulmate has noticed similar patterns. They have begun seeing reminders of hope in ordinary places. A familiar phrase. A meaningful conversation. An unexpected smile from a stranger. Each moment reminds them that choosing love was not a mistake. What surprises them most is how much lighter they feel. For so long, they believed protecting themselves meant staying silent. Now they understand that silence was the very thing keeping them from the peace they longed for. The decision to choose you did not create new fear, it removed an old burden. And once a burden is lifted, a person begins seeing the world differently. That is exactly what is happening now. Their future no longer feels empty. It feels possible. Not because every obstacle has disappeared, but because hope has finally become stronger than hesitation. Still, one question continues echoing in their heart. When the moment comes, will they believe me? That question matters because they know words alone may not be enough. Anyone can make promises. Anyone can speak beautiful sentences. But true love is revealed through consistent actions. So they have decided that when the opportunity arrives, they will let their actions speak before their words ever do. They want you to see sincerity instead of pressure. Peace instead of confusion. Commitment instead of uncertainty. That decision alone has already changed the path ahead. Yet something even more remarkable is about to unfold. Someone close to your soulmate has quietly noticed the change within them. They have seen the lighter smile, the calmer spirit, and the quiet confidence replacing months of hesitation. They may not know every detail, but they know one thing for certain. Something has awakened inside them. Soon, that person will ask a simple question. One honest question. A question your soulmate has been avoiding for far too long. And the answer they give will reveal far more than anyone expects. Because once those hidden feelings are finally spoken aloud, the story you thought was standing still will begin moving faster than either of you ever imagined. My beloved child. The question came far sooner than your soulmate expected. It wasn't planned. There was no dramatic setting, no perfect timing, and no opportunity to rehearse the words they had carried inside for so long. It happened during an ordinary conversation, the kind most people would forget by the end of the day. Yet this conversation would become unforgettable because one simple question reached straight into the place they had spent months trying to protect. "You've changed," someone close to them said gently. "What's different about you?" For a brief moment, they smiled without answering. Not because they wanted to hide the truth, but because they realized the answer was much bigger than they could explain in a single sentence. How could they describe the quiet transformation that had taken place inside them? How could they explain that after all this time, they had finally stopped fighting the feelings they had been carrying? The silence lasted only a few seconds. Then, with a calmness that surprised even them, they spoke. "I finally know who I want to choose." Those words hung in the air. No hesitation. No uncertainty. No apology. Just honesty. The person sitting across from them immediately noticed something different. This wasn't the voice of someone chasing a passing emotion. This was the voice of someone who had finally made peace with their own heart. "What made you so sure?" they asked. Your soulmate looked down for a moment, smiled softly, and answered with words they had never dared to say aloud before. "Because no matter how many times I tried to imagine my future without them, it never felt complete." The room became quiet again. Sometimes truth needs silence more than applause. The person listening could see that this decision had not been made overnight. It had been shaped through lonely evenings, unanswered questions, quiet prayers, and countless moments of reflection. Every disappointment had taught them something. Every delay had refined their understanding. Every season of waiting had quietly prepared them for this exact moment. Then came another unexpected question. "So, what are you going to do now?" This question lingered in the air longer than the first. Because choosing someone in your heart is one thing. Stepping toward them is another. For just a second, fear tried to return. The familiar voice whispered, "What if it's too late? What if they've already moved on? What if they don't believe me?" But almost immediately, another voice rose inside them, stronger, calmer, steadier. "What if this is exactly the right moment?" That single thought changed everything. Instead of imagining everything that could go wrong, they finally allowed themselves to imagine everything that could go right. For the first time in months, their future no longer looked like a collection of unanswered questions. It looked like possibility. That evening, they walked outside alone. The sky was beginning to change colors as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it the kind of peace that only comes after a difficult decision has finally been made. They stood there quietly, looking toward the horizon. Not searching for a sign. Not asking for certainty. Simply feeling grateful that they had finally stopped running from the truth. At that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Your name crossed their mind again. Not as a painful memory. Not as an impossible dream. but as someone they genuinely hoped to build a future with. And for the first time, imagining that future no longer frightened them. It filled them with hope. Meanwhile, you continued moving through your own day, unaware that someone was beginning to rewrite the story they believed could never have a happy ending. You may have felt ordinary today. You may have believed nothing significant was happening. But some of life's greatest turning points unfold quietly before they become visible. The seeds beneath the soil never announce themselves. Yet one day, they break through the surface, and everyone suddenly notices what had been growing all along. Your soulmate's courage is becoming one of those hidden seeds. Every hour that passes strengthens their resolve. Every quiet reflection confirms the decision they made. Every small reminder of you deepens their confidence that choosing love was never the mistake. They only regret waiting so long to admit it. Still, there is one final step they know they cannot avoid. Choosing you inside their heart was only the beginning. Now comes the moment when that choice must become action. They have already started thinking about the very first words they want to say when the opportunity arrives. Not grand promises. Not dramatic speeches. Just one honest sentence. One sentence capable of changing everything between you. And the remarkable part is this. They've already decided exactly how they want that first conversation to begin. The words are ready. Their heart is ready. Now only one moment remains, the moment when your paths begin moving toward each other in a way neither of you will be able to ignore. My beloved child. As the evening grew quieter, your soulmate found themselves returning to the same place in their thoughts again and again. It wasn't a physical place. It was a memory, a moment so small that most people would have forgotten it, yet it had remained alive inside their heart all this time. They remembered the first time they truly felt seen by you. Perhaps you didn't even realize it happened. Maybe it was a simple conversation. Maybe it was the kindness in your voice. Maybe it was the way you listened without judging, without rushing, without expecting anything in return. Whatever that moment was, it became the beginning of something they didn't fully understand until today. Back then, they dismissed it as coincidence. Today, they recognize it as the moment their heart quietly began choosing you. For a long time, they tried to convince themselves that life would be easier if they ignored those feelings. They poured themselves into work, responsibilities, distractions, and routines. They told themselves that time would erase what they felt. But time didn't erase it. It refined it. Every season apart only revealed how genuine those feelings truly were. There were days when they laughed with other people, yet somehow your memory still found its way into the quiet spaces between conversations. There were nights when they convinced themselves they were finally moving on, only to wake up realizing that the first thought crossing their mind was still you. That realization no longer scares them. Instead, it gives them clarity. Real love isn't measured by how loudly it begins. It's revealed by how faithfully it remains. And theirs remained. Tonight, they opened an old notebook they hadn't touched in months. Between unfinished plans and forgotten ideas, they found a page with a single sentence they had written long ago. I hope one day I have the courage to tell them the truth. They stared at those words for several minutes. A quiet smile slowly appeared across their face. They whispered softly. I finally do. Those 4 words carried more freedom than they ever imagined. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. From that moment forward, they stopped wondering whether they should reach out. Instead, they began thinking about how to do it with honesty, patience, and respect. Not to force an outcome. Not to demand an answer. Simply to make sure you would never have to wonder how they truly felt. At the same time, something subtle has been changing within you. You may not have recognized it yet, but your heart has been becoming softer toward hope. Things that once felt impossible no longer seem completely out of reach. The walls built from disappointment have begun to crack, little by little. Healing rarely happens all at once. It happens quietly. One hopeful thought. One peaceful moment. One unexpected reminder that life can still surprise you. That is exactly where you are now. Neither of you realizes just how close your stories have come to intersecting again. Every decision you've both made separately has been moving in the same direction. Like 2 paths winding through different valleys before finally meeting on the same mountain road. Neither traveler can yet see the other. But both are getting closer with every step. Your soulmate has even begun imagining what that first meeting could feel like. Not with unrealistic expectations. Not with perfect words prepared. Just with gratitude. Gratitude for another chance. Gratitude for growth. Gratitude that life sometimes gives people the opportunity to become the version of themselves they needed to be before love could truly flourish. They no longer want to impress you. They simply want to be genuine. Because they have learned something valuable during this journey. Authenticity creates deeper connections than perfection ever could. That lesson has transformed them. And the transformation hasn't gone unnoticed. Someone else has started paying attention. Not because they are interfering. But because they can clearly see that your soulmate is carrying a joy they haven't seen in a very long time. Soon, that person will quietly encourage them with words they never expected to hear. Words that will remove the last remaining hesitation from their heart. Those words won't just strengthen your soulmate's courage. They will set into motion a chain of events that neither of you can stop once it begins. And when that moment arrives, you may suddenly realize that what seemed like silence was actually preparation all along, because the next step your soulmate takes will be far more meaningful than anything they have ever done before. My beloved child. The encouragement came on a day that seemed completely ordinary. Your soulmate wasn't looking for advice. They weren't planning to speak about their feelings. In fact, they intended to keep everything locked safely inside their heart just a little longer. But life has a remarkable way of placing the right conversation in front of us when we least expect it. Someone they deeply respected noticed the quiet change that had been growing within them. "You've been smiling differently lately," the person said with a gentle laugh. "There's something in your heart you've stopped hiding from yourself." Your soulmate looked away for a moment. It wasn't embarrassment. It was the realization that the truth had become impossible to conceal. After a long pause, they admitted softly, "There is someone I can't stop thinking about." The person listening didn't interrupt. They simply waited. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can offer is the patience to let another heart speak. For the first time, your soulmate shared everything they had been carrying. They spoke about the fear of arriving too late. They spoke about the regret of waiting so long. They spoke about the countless moments they almost reached out but convinced themselves to stay silent. Most of all, they spoke about you. Not as an impossible dream. Not as someone placed on a pedestal. But as the person who had quietly changed the direction of their heart. When they finally finished speaking, the room became silent once again. Then came a response they never expected. If your heart has remained this certain after everything you've been through, the person said gently, then maybe what you're feeling deserves to be honored, not hidden. Those words settled deeply inside them. For months they had been asking themselves whether their feelings were too much. Now, for the first time, someone encouraged them to stop questioning love and start trusting it. It wasn't permission they needed. It was perspective. And perspective changes everything. That conversation became the final piece of courage they had been missing. As they walked home that evening, something inside them felt lighter than it had in years. They no longer saw the future as a collection of obstacles. They saw it as a series of opportunities waiting for one brave decision. Every step they took felt symbolic. Not because the road itself was special, but because they knew they were finally walking toward the life they had secretly hoped for. Meanwhile, without realizing it, your own story has been moving forward in ways you cannot yet measure. The delays you've experienced have not been empty. They have been shaping your heart. There were lessons only patience could teach. There was wisdom only waiting could reveal. Looking back someday, you may discover that the timing you once questioned was quietly protecting something beautiful before placing it into your hands. Your soulmate has begun understanding this too. They no longer resent the waiting. Instead, they are grateful for the person it has helped them become. Because if they had reached you months ago, they might have spoken from fear. Today, they are preparing to speak from peace. That difference matters. Words born from fear seek reassurance. Words born from peace offer reassurance. Your soulmate wants to become someone whose presence brings calm instead of confusion. Someone whose actions create trust instead of uncertainty. Someone who loves with consistency instead of impulse. That transformation didn't happen overnight. It was built through every difficult lesson they refused to waste. Late that night, they sat quietly with their phone in their hands. Your name appeared before them once again. Their thumb hovered over the screen. For a brief moment, the old fear whispered, "Wait one more day." But something inside them answered immediately. "You've already waited long enough." Their heart began beating faster. Not because they were uncertain, but because they understood that the next decision could become the beginning of an entirely new chapter. They took a slow breath. Closed their eyes for just a second. Then they started typing. Not a long speech. Not dramatic declarations. Just honest words. Simple words. Words carrying months of reflection, healing, hope, and quiet courage. They read the message once. Then again. Then one final time. Their finger moved closer to the screen. Only one touch remained. One small movement capable of changing two lives forever. But just before they pressed send, Something completely unexpected appeared on their screen. A notification. A single message. One unexpected interruption that made them stop instantly. They stared at it in complete silence. Because what they saw next would force them to make the most important decision of their entire journey, and that decision would determine whether your paths finally begin to come together. My beloved child. For a brief moment, everything stood still. The message they had carefully written remained on the screen, every word carrying the weight of months of healing, patience, and hope. Their finger hovered just above the send button, but that unexpected notification demanded their attention. Their heart raced. Not because they suddenly wanted to turn back, but because life had placed one final pause before the next chapter could begin. Slowly, they opened the notification. It wasn't bad news. It wasn't a warning. It was something far simpler, yet somehow far more meaningful. A close friend had sent a short message that read, "Whatever you're about to do, don't let fear make the decision for you." Your soulmate stared at those words in complete silence. The timing was almost impossible to ignore. Out of all the moments that message could have arrived, it appeared at the exact second they were about to choose between courage and hesitation. They leaned back and smiled. Not because someone had told them what to do, but because the reminder echoed the very lesson they had been learning all along. Fear had already stolen enough moments. It would not steal another. They looked at your name once more. Instead of imagining everything that might go wrong, they began imagining the peace that comes from finally being honest. Whether the answer would come immediately or much later no longer mattered as much. What mattered was that you would finally know the truth. They whispered quietly to themselves. No more hiding. Then they read their message one final time. Every sentence reflected who they had become, not the fearful version of themselves from the past, but someone willing to choose sincerity over silence. They made one small change. They removed every word that sounded like pressure. They removed every sentence that expected something in return. What remained was beautifully simple. A message filled with respect, hope, gratitude, and truth. Because genuine love never forces. It simply reveals itself. As they finished reading it, they realized something remarkable. For the first time in years, they already felt lighter, even before sending it. That is what honesty does. It frees the heart before it changes the circumstances. Meanwhile, you continued living your day, completely unaware that someone was preparing to place a piece of their heart into your hands. You may have believed nothing significant was happening. You may have thought this day would fade into memory like every other ordinary day. But some days quietly become turning points without announcing themselves. Years from now, people often look back and say, "That was the day everything began." Not because the world changed overnight, but because one brave decision started a chain of events that could never be undone. Your soulmate understands this now. They no longer measure progress by immediate results. They measure it by faithful steps. One honest choice. One courageous conversation. One act of trust. Step by step, they are becoming the person they always hoped they could be. And here's the beautiful truth. While they have been preparing to reach toward you, life has also been preparing you to receive what once would have arrived at the wrong time. Growth has been happening on both sides. Healing has been happening on both sides. Hope has been quietly returning to both hearts. Neither of you can fully see it yet. But the distance that once felt impossible has been shrinking with every lesson you've both learned. Your paths are no longer moving away from each other. They are moving toward the same horizon. And now, the moment they feared for so long has finally arrived. They took one deep breath. Their heartbeat slowed. A quiet sense of peace settled over them. Without overthinking. Without looking back. Without allowing fear one final chance to speak. They gently pressed send. The message was gone. No longer hidden. No longer imagined. It was real. For a few seconds, they simply sat there, looking at the screen. Not anxiously. Not desperately. But peacefully. Because whatever happened next, they knew they had finally honored the truth in their heart. Yet what they did not know was that, almost at the exact same moment, something unexpected was unfolding on your side as well. Something that neither of you could have predicted. A quiet event. A small conversation. One seemingly ordinary moment. That was already preparing your heart for what had just been set in motion. And when those two moments finally meet, the story you believed had been standing still will begin moving faster than either of you ever imagined. My beloved child. The message had been sent. There was no taking it back. No editing the words. No rewriting the emotions they had finally allowed themselves to express. For the first few moments, your soulmate did nothing at all. They simply sat in silence, listening to the steady rhythm of their own heartbeat. It was strange how peaceful they felt. They had expected anxiety. They had expected regret. Instead, they felt something they hadn't experienced in a very long time. Freedom. The burden they had carried for months had quietly slipped away. For so long, they believed that silence would protect them from disappointment. But now they understood something beautiful. Silence had never been protecting them. It had only been postponing the life they truly wanted. As they looked out the window, the evening sky seemed different somehow. The same clouds drifted overhead. The same breeze moved through the trees. Yet everything appeared brighter because their heart was no longer divided between fear and hope. They had finally become honest. Meanwhile, your own evening was unfolding in ways that seemed completely ordinary. You finished one task. You answered a conversation. You moved through familiar routines without realizing that the atmosphere around your life was quietly changing. Sometimes, the biggest turning points never arrive with loud announcements. They arrive disguised as ordinary moments. A single notification. A brief conversation. An unexpected memory. A quiet feeling that refuses to leave your heart. Those are often the moments that gently redirect an entire future. At that very hour, someone close to you noticed something they had never mentioned before. "You've seemed different lately," they said. "You smile less with your face, but more with your heart." You paused. You weren't even sure how to answer. Because deep inside, you had been feeling something you couldn't explain. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't excitement. It was anticipation. As though your heart knew a page was about to turn before your mind had even finished reading the current chapter. You dismissed the feeling. You told yourself it was only your imagination. But some truths are sensed before they are understood. While you were trying to ignore that quiet feeling, your soulmate continued looking at the conversation on their screen. There was still no reply. Oddly enough, that no longer frightened them. Months ago, every passing minute would have filled them with doubt. Now, every passing minute strengthened their patience. Because they finally understood that meaningful things cannot always be rushed. They whispered softly. "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." Those simple words revealed how much they had changed. Love had taught them patience. Waiting had taught them trust. Healing had taught them compassion. The person who was once afraid of every unanswered question had become someone willing to give both time and space without losing hope. That quiet maturity was the greatest gift this journey had given them. Later that night, they opened a drawer they hadn't touched in years. Inside was a small collection of old keepsakes, photographs, handwritten notes, little reminders of different seasons of life. As they sorted through them, they found something unexpected. A small piece of paper. Folded carefully. Almost forgotten. When they unfolded it, they smiled through tears. Written across the page were words they had once copied because they hoped they would someday become true. The right love never asks you to become someone else. It inspires you to become your truest self. They closed their eyes. Only now did they realize those words had quietly become reality. Choosing you had not changed who they were. It had revealed who they had always been beneath the fear. That realization filled them with gratitude instead of uncertainty. At that exact same time, your phone rested only a short distance away. Silent. Unnoticed. The message waiting there had not yet been opened. Not because it wasn't important, but because life sometimes delays a moment by only a few minutes so that two hearts arrive at exactly the right place emotionally. The message waited patiently. Your soulmate waited peacefully. And your own heart, though you couldn't yet see it, was slowly becoming ready for the words that were about to find you. Because when you finally discover what was written in that message, you will realize it contains one sentence so unexpectedly honest, that it has the power to dissolve months of misunderstanding and open a door neither of you believed was still waiting. My beloved child. Minutes passed quietly. The world continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Cars drove by. People laughed. Conversations began and ended. Yet beneath the surface of an ordinary evening, two hearts were standing closer to the same moment than they had ever been before. Your phone remained untouched. Not because you were avoiding it. Not because you had chosen to ignore anyone. Simply because life has a way of delaying certain moments until our hearts are ready to receive them. Your soulmate wasn't watching the screen every second anymore. That surprised them. Only a few weeks ago, they would have refreshed the conversation endlessly, searching for any tiny sign that their message had been seen. But tonight was different. They had already won the hardest battle. The battle against their own fear. Whatever happened next was no longer something they could control. And strangely, surrendering that control brought them peace. They stepped outside once again. The evening air felt cool against their face as they looked up at the stars beginning to appear across the sky. "So this is what courage feels like," they whispered. "Not loud. Not dramatic. Just peaceful." For the first time in a long time, they realized they didn't need every answer immediately. Some answers become more beautiful because they arrive after patience has had time to deepen them. Back inside, someone noticed the calm expression on their face. "You look different," they said. Your soulmate smiled. "I stopped fighting what my heart has known all along." The person nodded gently. "You know," they replied, "real love doesn't always arrive when we're ready. Sometimes it waits until we've become the person capable of protecting it." Those words settled deeply. Your soulmate realized that every delay, every disappointment, every unanswered question had shaped them into someone stronger, kinder, and more patient than they had been before. If everything had happened earlier, they might have spoken from insecurity. Today, they were speaking from peace. And that changes everything. Meanwhile, your evening quietly continued. Without realizing it, your thoughts drifted somewhere unexpected. A familiar memory crossed your mind. Not because you forced it. Not because someone mentioned it. It simply appeared. You paused for a moment, wondering why. You smiled without fully understanding the reason. Some memories return not to pull us backward, but to prepare us for what is about to come. Deep within your heart, something almost forgotten was beginning to awaken. Not certainty. Not expectation. Just openness. The walls built by disappointment were no longer standing as tall as they once had. Hope was quietly finding its way back through the smallest cracks. At nearly that same moment, your phone softly lit up. The screen brightened for only a second before becoming still again. You didn't notice. You were occupied with something else. But your soulmate's message was waiting. Patiently. Silently. Without demanding your attention. Because genuine feelings never force their way into someone's life. They wait with grace. Across the distance, your soulmate closed their eyes for a brief moment. A quiet prayer filled their heart. Not a prayer asking for everything to happen exactly as they wished. But a prayer that whatever happened next would bring peace to both of you. If our paths are meant to continue together, they whispered, let honesty become the beginning. Those simple words carried no pressure. Only hope. Only gratitude. Only trust. Little did they know. At almost that exact same moment, your hand slowly reached toward your phone. Without thinking. Without planning. Just a simple habit. Your fingers wrapped gently around it. The screen came to life. Notifications appeared one by one. Your eyes scanned them casually. Until they stopped. One name quietly captured your attention. Your heartbeat changed. Just slightly. Almost too subtly to notice. You stared at the screen for several long seconds. You hadn't opened the message yet. But somehow, before reading a single word, Your heart already sensed that whatever waited behind that unopened conversation was different from anything you had expected. And as your thumb slowly moved toward the screen, neither you nor your soulmate could imagine that the very first sentence inside that message would unlock a memory both of you had been carrying in silence, a memory that would change the direction of everything that followed.